Hey, everybody. Welcome to our Disruptor Discussions Masterclass, Season 2. My name is Jennifer Fry, and I am your host. I absolutely love this part of the week. It's really one of the very best hours that I get to spend every week. So here's the deal. I have a business called Appreciated Asset. We are in year 7 in business, and our mission at Appreciated Asset is to create a ripple effect for incredible business solutions and helping them grow their footprint through our efforts. And as I've grown the incredible network that I've been able to curate over the last several years as my business has grown, I've come across some unbelievable experts who also help businesses grow through their own expertise. And it's not necessarily through the sales, like that's what we do. But what I've also realized as an entrepreneur and a small business owner and growing a team and all of the messy, wonderful challenges that comes along with that is that there is zero business problems that more revenue cannot solve. Zero. For everything in your business, it can always be tracked back to, we can fix this, and more revenue makes it a lot easier. So while we bring more revenue to our clients through our services, we also realize that all of these experts are able to do the same. Again, not necessarily through a sales strategy like we implement, but through their own subject matter expertise. So we have experts who come on and talk about financial solutions and human resources solutions and mindset solutions, marketing, all kinds of different ways that you can take new information and apply it to your business in ways that you hadn't thought of before. Because again, disruptors are our thing. You know, that's our psychographic. At Appreciated Asset, we love working with disruptors, businesses that are operating outside the status quo and delivering service that's so superior to anyone else out there that it's just puts it on a whole new level. And as much as we do that for our clients, again, there's so many other disruptors out there in their own spaces. And the thing about a disruptor is they are collaborative, they're excited, they're dynamic, and they're willing to think outside the box and put their client's success over their own comfort. Because it is not super comfortable sometimes to go against status quo. And that's what we're here to do, is really create a stage and highlight these incredible disruptors. I love to talk to you guys every week about two things. One is what's new with us as a business and with our organization. So we have a new social media director on board that will be coming on next week. I think we'll be introducing her, and she's going to be more frequent of a participant in our masterclass, but also you'll be seeing her, and she'll be really helping us with our social media strategies going forward. I'm really excited about that. All about delegation, right? And then also, I like to tell you guys, I'm going to start a new little segment, because these are like little 30-second clips, but new segment about disruptor hacks. Because again, I am always looking at reinventing the wheel. Just because something's been done a certain way doesn't always have to be, right? So I am going to tell you guys about my son, who is got some really expansive requirements and commitments outside of school. And we spend, I'd say, probably 12 hours a week with him at rehearsals for his breakdancing. And when I first started this, we made this commitment for the year, I was so intimidated, like, how am I going to get anything done while I do this? Because it was so much back and forth and time in the car. So what I did is I got Wi-Fi in my car, which he obviously, as a 10-year-old, is a huge fan that we've got Wi-Fi in the car. But I got Wi-Fi in the car. I got a desk that hooks up to my steering wheel in the car. And I have about 12 hours a week now that I spend, well, let's say 10 hours a week, because I go get manicures too. I spend all this time now completely uninterrupted to work on the business, to work on our clients, to work on messaging, for, our client delivery and all of this extra time that really has helped me sink back into the business. And it's been amazing. So when we started down this road, I thought it was going to be this huge inconvenience, and I thought things were just going to be really chaotic and hectic. I actually have more time now than I ever thought I would have because of this. So I just wanted to kind of share that. We took what we thought would be a really big distraction and challenge and turned it into a huge opportunity, and a huge, the productivity that comes out of me in that time is phenomenal. So I'm now super grateful for it. And I look forward to those times because I'm able to delegate certain things for that space. Okay, that's enough. I just wanted to give you that mindset shift that sometimes what looks like it can be a game stopper, right, can actually be just a completely new up level in the business. All right. I am so excited to welcome Roberta Moore today. Roberta and I met last summer before she made her relocation move to Charleston, and we just became instant friends. She approaches her area of expertise in such a unique way, with such genuine kindness and curiosity. And when I learned about her business and the way she helps organizations, the way she helps teams and leaders change their mindset and the way they practice in their own businesses, I knew we had to bring her on. So as soon as we got season 2 underway, I reached out to her immediately. It was like, you have to be a part of this because I absolutely love the way she talks about EQ. Some of you may be really new to EQ, emotional intelligence. Some of you may know a lot about it, but I really encourage you to get curious today and listen to what Roberta has to say, and see how this can be applied in your own organizations. And before I go to the bio, which is incredibly impressive, I'm also going to mention we will do a hot seat. If you have questions, please put them in the chat for us. And if you would like to do a hot seat, message me or message Joey, and let us know, and we will give you the opportunity to do some one-on-one coaching with Roberta today, which is a really exciting opportunity and super generous of her. Okay, so EQI coach founder, executive coach, and author of Emotion at Work, Unleashing the Secret Power of Emotional Intelligence, Roberta Moore draws on nearly 4 decades in executive coaching, professional services, and psychotherapy to help her clients understand and unleash the power of emotional intelligence, also known as EQ. Through individual and team EQ coaching, team workshops, and EQ assessments and audits. Moore's work earned her a 2020 Enterprising Woman of the Year award, one of the most prestigious recognitions for women business owners, as well as 2020 Globee Women World Female Achievers Champion of the Year award, and a 2021 Stevie's Award. Oh, that's awesome, Roberta.
Thanks.
Moore is also a member of the Forbes Coaches Council and publishes articles on Forbes Monthly. She is contributing author to the 2020 book, The Anatomy of Accomplishment, Your Guide to Bigger, Better, Bolder Business Results, an anthology of professional wisdom from women business leaders across the country. Roberta, thank you so much for being here. I absolutely cannot wait to learn about how to really up-level the way we implement EQ in our personal lives and at work, right? So I'm going to hand things over to you and have you share all your wisdom.
Thank you so much for inviting me to be here, Jennifer, and thank you for the wonderful introduction. Those of you who live in Charleston, if you're going to be at the She Means Business Conference on March 27th, I am a vendor and I'm going to be, I'll be giving people a chance to win copies of those books that Jennifer mentioned, as well as a few others. So Jennifer, I'm going to be disruptive of my own habit and my own routine today. Usually when I'm asked to do a presentation, I share lots of slides and lots of information. Sometimes in a presentation like this, I might have 50 slides. So I decided to be disruptive today and only have a few slides because I've attended one of Jennifer's disruptive conversations before and noticed that the presenter spent more time telling about their story and why their story helped them transformed, which I thought would be very relevant to listeners today. So I'm trying this out for the first time. We'll see how it goes. So what I believe makes me unique or disruptive is actually my background. I started out in internal audit, which led into public accounting. And then I realized when I was taking client tax return intakes, when I would collect their numbers and their information, people tended to talk about their personal situations. When they're sharing numbers, any of you on the call who are in the financial services or financial advisory realm might already know this. People would say, oh gosh, Roberta, I think I'm going to get a divorce next year. What does that mean for my tax return? What do I need to do? And I found myself being so much more interested in that than I was in, tax returns are fun. They're kind of like doing a puzzle, but I was so much more interested in the people aspect that when I got married and when we moved to the South from St. Louis, Missouri for the first time, we were in a different town in South Carolina, Columbia, South Carolina. There weren't any other female well, there were two. There were two other female CPAs at the time that I could find in the town. And there weren't I couldn't find any back then, women's networking groups. So my husband said, because I was kind of discouraged, why don't you just go back to school? You're always talking about therapy. You're always talking about psychology. And that was because I grew up in a family where there was a lot of chaos, a lot of drama, a lot of emotional instability, I would say. A lot of reactiveness. And I'm an extremely sensitive person, so I didn't do well in those circumstances. And one of my friends, when I got into public accounting, said, Roberta, I think you'd benefit from seeing a psychotherapist. So I did, and it just turned out that woman, her name was Laura, she was very much into emotional intelligence. She was so into emotional intelligence that she had written what she called a talk paper for me, and it was basically based on Daniel Goleman's book, which came out in the 90s. So that tells you how long ago that was. But I had been talking about therapy because of that experience and about how that woman really helped to change my life. And that's why my husband said, there's this, there was a school in Spartanburg called Converse, it's still there. And they had a very wonderful program for marriage and family therapy, which was focused all on relationships and systems theory, which basically means how if one person in a system, which could be a family or a team in a corporation, or just your network of people, if one person is having a problem or an issue, everybody is affected by that issue as well as contributing to that issue, because nobody is an island or lives in a vacuum. So I went to school to study that. And then when I got out, as some of you on the call know, I moved to Hendersonville, North Carolina, and I started a private practice. And what I learned there, a lot of my clients were professionals. I learned that I missed using my business brain. But people would come in and they'd tell me, I will never forget this one story. It changed my whole perspective on what I wanted to do, what I wanted to offer people in my career. It was a banker who was fairly high level. I think he was a senior vice president. And his wife was a school guidance counselor. And they came in with their daughter who was in 8th grade. And when I asked what was the problem, they told me the daughter usually gets hundreds on all her school tests. This time she got like a 99 on her math test, and she said she was going to kill herself. And the parents thought she was very serious. So it was in working with that young girl that when I would ask her questions, I found out she'd say, well, daddy doesn't play with me. I wish daddy would be home. I wish daddy would talk to me. I wish mommy and daddy would spend more time together. And when I called that professional in, the father, and gave him this, talked to him about this, I found out that he was also having trouble, because that's a communication issue. He was also having trouble communicating at work, communicating at his job. And he was concerned about how he was perceived by his team. And so I started to think about, ooh, how could I combine both worlds? How could I combine my MBA, my CPA, my master's in tax with what I know about marriage and family therapy and systems work? Because to me, I thought that would make a holistic framework, because it would help people at home and at work. And I knew from my own life in growing up in my, kind of drama-filled, chaotic household, that if I was having a personal problem uh, in the morning when I left for work, and back then I worked, we all worked in person, I carried it into my workday. And I wasn't as productive, and I wasn't as effective. And another big story I tell, because this was another, this is another way that you can relate to emotional intelligence. So hopefully I'm telling you different ways from my own story, from my own background, that you might relate into what this work is all about. When I was in internal audit and an internal auditor, I once had a review with we had several bosses, one of my bosses, and he said to me very innocently, Roberta, you didn't need to take that big of a sample size on that audit. You really didn't need to do that. Why did you waste your time? He was probably in his 50s. I was about 22, 23. I burst into tears. You can imagine back in, in the old days, 50-some-year-old man faced with this kid who's crying, and when he just asked an innocent question. I heard it as terrible criticism, because my opinion is my mother had been very critical of me. So I took it personally. It ended the meeting. He just stopped the meeting right there. That was a Friday. I got a call from my main boss at home when I was at home at the end of the workday, and he kind of read me the riot act for making him look bad to this other supervisor because I cried. So emotional intelligence is all about, how do you emotionally self-regulate? How do you emotionally self-soothe when you're in a situation where the conversation is awkward, the conversation is heated, and you are afraid that you're going to accidentally blurt something out, or like me, burst into tears when you didn't? Did I want to burst into tears at that moment? No. I felt a lot of guilt and shame after that episode and after that meeting. It was really the reason why that friend at the time, said, Roberta, I think you could benefit from therapy. And I knew I needed to learn more about how to use my emotions at work, because just like me, a lot of my clients present, when I'm called in to ask for help, the person who calls me, the HR director or the CEO or the managing partner, will say, so-and-so is technically proficient. So-and-so gets their work done. They do a great job at that, but they are rubbing the rest of the team the wrong way. Or we're afraid, I have a situation right now where the CEO told me, we're really afraid the whole team's going to quit because of how this person leads the team, how they communicate with the team, how they make them feel. They're very critical or sharp. And when there are people like that, the company can't be productive. The company can't be as profitable as they could be. They can't be as proficient as they could be. So I'm on fire and passion about educating people how to use their emotions in the very best way, so that you can achieve better results because of how it affected and changed my own life. And then the transformation I see with my clients, because I do combine, where it's ethical, where it's legal, cognitive behavioral therapy type skills with emotional intelligence skills and principles based on a model called the EQI 2.0. And that is different. That is disruptive because most people, a lot of times coaches don't have that therapy or psychology background. So I love the EQ model. There is an assessment tool that comes with it. And one of the reasons I love giving this assessment to my clients is because it's skill-based. I'm certain you've heard of DISC or Myers-Briggs, very popular, and there are others like Predictive Index, other popular, the Hogan, other popular and all very, very good personality indicators. This is not a personality indicator. This EQI 2.0 is skill-based. So with personality, there's a narrow range in which we can change our personality over time. You might fluctuate a little bit, but you're not going to fluctuate a lot. With EQ, your skills can go up and down quite dramatically. And a lot of times if I see somebody have a report where their overall EQ is below average, I often ask them, is there something going on in your life? Are you depressed? Is there a big change? And a lot of times I'll find out, oh yes, I just got fired from a previous job and I'm new at this company and I'm still adjusting to that, or maybe I'm getting a divorce. Those are reasons, those are transition times where you have to be very careful that your overall emotional behavior could be lower than you would like, or that would be in your best interest. So what is EQ anyway? You might be wondering that. And if you want to type into the chat what you think it is, I'd be curious, Jennifer, if you might tell me, what do some people think EQ is? I've kind of said it, so I've given you lots of hints. I'm sure you don't want too much dead space for airtime, Jennifer, so I'll move on. Somebody can still answer if they wish. This is a feeling wheel. I got it from Stefan Fontaine, who is a master of positive psychology. And I'm going to invite you to think of each of these feelings, like think of this as a deck of cards. This whole wheel is a deck of cards. And each feeling is like one card in the deck. So the idea is, if we're faced in a situation where you think you're going to react instead of respond, where you're afraid you might blurt something out and later come to regret it, you want to choose the feeling you're going to play. You want to choose the card you're going to play, like if you're playing poker or something, instead of letting that feeling play you. You know, if you're playing cards, you don't want to get into the game not knowing how to play the game, right? Or, you know, throwing down some random card without being mindful or intentional about it. So this is my favorite definition of EQ that I've personally come up with. It's knowing how to play the emotion so that you will have the most influence over people to have a good result, to have the best result. EQ actually came from Aristotle. There's a famous quote. He's considered the father of emotional intelligence. He would say in his famous quote, EQ is using the right emotion at the right time with the right intensity in the right way. And even anger can be used wisely. So there aren't any bad emotions. It's just, is this the time for it? Is it the right expression? Is it the right way to use it? I know that Jennifer told you that one of the things I would share today is the top 3 skills that Dr. Steven Stein found in a study that he did. He is the owner, he owns MHS, multi-health care systems. He's Canadian, he's in Canada, he's a serial entrepreneur, he's written several books. And he likes to do statistical correlation studies with people who are successful. So in this case, he chose 76 of the most profitable CEOs in the US and Canada across diverse industries to see, do they have any of the 16 skills that are in this model in balance, and would they be scoring above average? And he found 3. And I always remember it by the acronym ACE. So I think about ACE your career or ACE the hardware store. So I'm going to explain those 3 to you right now. It's assertiveness, confidence, and empathy. So assertiveness is our ability to take initiative. It's the sweet spot. The definition in this model is it's the sweet spot between the 2 extremes. We're not going to be passive and we're not going to be aggressive. If you're passive, you care, and you're in a negotiation, you care more that the other person gets what they want. You don't care as much about what you want because you want to look good, or you want their approval, or you want to people please. When you're on the other end, aggression, you care only what you want. You want to get out of the negotiation what you want to get. You don't even care if the other person comes out of the negotiation with anything that they want. And so the sweet spot in the middle is both caring both about yourself and about the other person, and trying to reach a compromise or reach a spot where each of us can feel like we got enough of what we want. So that's it's a lot about taking initiative too. I have to keep working on my assertiveness because I have such high empathy as a skill, which I'll explain in a moment. Self-regard is what Dr. Stein actually calls confidence, but I wanted to make the acronym, so I do it as confidence. But it means your ability to love and respect yourself, even though you know you've got room to grow. So people who have good self-regard are not overly self-critical. You know, like I used to be very, very extremely self-critical. I guess I might have learned that in my family growing up. But they're able to say, they're also able to say, I care as much about taking care of myself as I care about you. So a lot of times people pleasers or people who are codependent usually are low in self-regard, and we have to work on that. This is a foundational skill. So I have exercises that I do first when I take on a new client, especially if they're low in self-regard, because I know they won't be able to build the other skills very well unless they can first feel good enough about themselves. And usually people who have good enough self-regard are coachable. If you have very low self-regard, you're usually not going to have a successful outcome in a coaching session, because you're going to hear, you know, like I did, that made me cry with that one supervisor back in the day. You're going to hear the constructive feedback you're going to take it personally, and you're going to beat up on yourself, and then you're going to shut down, and you're going to be resistant or defensive or not open to change. Empathy is your ability to put yourself in somebody else's shoes and see things from their perspective. It doesn't mean you have to agree with them. You could say, I still disagree, but it's your ability to see, hear, and understand them, which is what we all want and need as humans, to be seen, heard, and understood. I had a client this morning before this call who is young in her career, and she's just changed employers. Just to give you an example, she's let's see, what occupation can I'll say she's a physical therapist, even though she's not. So she's a physical therapist, and she works with children. She had a patient that she was supposed to help physically. The patient is 7 years old. And what she came across was the patient has mental health issues as well as needing physical therapy. But because of the mental health issues, my client is having a lot of problems doing the physical therapy with the young girl, because the mental health issues, the acting out behavior is overshadowing things. And so what my client talked to me about this morning was, well, I went to my manager, I went to my supervisor, and I tried to tell her about the struggle I was having, and she didn't acknowledge it. She was very dismissive. I was telling her I don't think I could work with that patient, that child. And she just said, well, she basically said, you're going to have to anyway. She didn't say it like that, but that's what my client heard. So my client feels dismissed. She's like, what am I going to do? So we worked on her being more assertive, her having strong boundaries, and having another meeting with the manager to explain how this could be a liability to the company, this situation. I'm leaving a lot out, but let's just say it's not good. Let's just say the acting out behavior was dangerous. And, so that's my point. It would have been better for the manager to say, here's what I hear you saying, repeat it back to her. I hear you saying you're in over your head. You don't think this is a good patient even for the clinic. You think they need a mental health care provider first before they have a physical therapist. I hear you. That would have been better than my client said she wouldn't have felt so dismissed. So having these three in combination, I almost always suggest to leaders to be warm and firm. If you can be assertive and empathetic while still being self-assured and confident, you're going to hit the trifecta. So Steven Stein found that these CEOs were the most profitable, these that were balanced in these skills and above average in these skills. So actually in that Anatomy of Accomplishment book, the chapter that I wrote was about these three skills and how I think we can adapt them, any business owner or any person who's a professional or any person in business, whether you're a leader or not, can work on those three skills and get them into balance, and you're automatically going to be more productive, more profitable, and personally fulfilled. I seem to have, there we go. Lost the ability there for a second to advance the slides. I'm going to wrap this up. I don't have many slides left. See, I'm trying to be disruptive, have less slides, and I'm still talking a lot. Jennifer had asked me to talk about what can you take away today? What are some things you can do differently this afternoon as a result of being here right now? And so quickly, I want to explain that we all have a part of our brain called the amygdala. It's actually at the brainstem back here. And that's where the fight, flight, or freeze aspect of ourselves would live. It's primitive. It's from the cave people days. It's what pumps adrenaline and cortisol into our bodies to run from the saber-toothed tiger in the cave people days. Today, it doesn't know the difference between something that's a real, honest to goodness physical threat or something that a psychological deadline or threat that we are just imagining. So it still pumps the adrenaline and cortisol in, like happened to my client that I told you about last night when she was doing this work. She got very anxious. And it thinks it's protecting you. It thinks it's helping you. It's just very misguided. And it sacrifices accuracy for speed. It goes to the worst case scenario. It's what happens when you see people trigger or have a reaction and they go from 0 to 1,000 in a split second. And honestly, that's not a good look. It doesn't look good. It's kind of like me when I burst into tears that day. So what do? How can you help yourself? You have to learn to self-soothe and emotionally self-regulate. And one takeaway today is if you stop and you put in a pause. Like when I was learning this skill, I honestly had to sit on my hands because I like to talk a lot with my hands. So I would sit on my hands to develop more impulse control and not say anything for a few seconds. And then your deep breathing. Like if you can take 3 deep yoga or belly breaths, all the way from your belly up into your chest, that resets the vagus nerve, your central nervous system. It calms you down. You feel some relief. Because guess what? The blood has to flow all the way from back of the neck to the top of your head to your forehead, which is your prefrontal cortex. That's the home of emotional intelligence. Because another definition of emotional intelligence is combining the head with the heart and acting from both. So you're not only acting from one or the other, because sometimes those aren't good looks, but you're acting from the combination of both. And then you want to debate, dispute, and dismiss the negative thought that the amygdala or the reptile brain is telling you. One of my clients told me she took debate, dispute, dismiss, pasted it all over her computer and her bathroom mirror, and she repeats this to herself every day. And she said that really helps her from saying things that she doesn't mean when she's just being reactive. So I'm finally done talking. If anybody wants to be on the hot seat or has any questions, I'm up for that.
I love it. Thank you so much. I
You're
have
welcome.
questions. If anyone has questions, please put them in the chat for us. And again, if you would like to hot seat, let us know, and we'll make that happen for you. Otherwise, you get to see me get super vulnerable, which is certainly my favorite thing to do. No. All right, so I want to start with one thing. You talked about something in the very beginning that made me think of something that I do pretty often in my life, which is compartmentalize. You were talking about your story with your boss, which thank you so much for sharing that, because I think so many of us have had experiences like that in the past. I certainly have, where you look back at it and it is like horrifying, right? And at the same time, with having increased EQ, you're able to say, I did the best I could with the tools that I had, right?
Yes. Yes, yes, because I left out the part that, again, I was like 22 or 23 when
right.
that happened. I'd like to think youth was involved, but we know from the research, just because you age does not mean necessarily that your EQ increases. You have to work on it.
Yeah.
We're not taught a lot of these skills, but I left out the part that I ruminated. Horrible anxiety the entire weekend.
I'm sure. Yeah, I'm sure. Talk to me about having a high EQ versus the ability to compartmentalize. Because I think sometimes people can put something in a box and move past it and then focus on something else where they're not necessarily employing or growing that emotional intelligence. They are simply putting it in a box and refocusing.
It's a great question, Jennifer. I think by compartmentalizing, putting in a box, refocusing, I think what you're saying is shoving it underground,
Right.
repressing the emotion and not feeling it in the moment.
Yes.
Causes lots of physical health and mental health problems, actually. So the opposite of that, if somebody were not to do that, then they would be, so if somebody does that, they're going to be low in emotional self-awareness. And if somebody doesn't do that, they're going to be high in emotional self-awareness. So being able to label the feeling that you're feeling in the moment, know you're feeling the feeling, and then it's not exactly compartmentalization. It's like, I'm going to look at this later. I'm not shoving it down and never going to look at it again. It's just not appropriate to express in this moment, but I'm going to make a plan that tonight when I can write in my journal, you know, or talk to my coach in Voxer, I will face this emotion, because there's interesting research coming out, especially from Nicole Sachs, who's just written a book called The Mind-Body Connection. She's not the first one to talk about this, but she gives some current research about how when we don't look at those emotions, it's like a beach ball when you're a kid. Say emotions are the air in the beach ball, and you're trying to shove it under the water and hold it there. Well, what happens? You know how hard that is. It's a struggle. It pops up. The ball just pops up when you least expect it, or maybe at the most inopportune time. And then it's going to cause you to derail. It's going to cause you to be reactive. You're not going to respond well. And she says it causes lots of stress in the body. Stress tolerance is actually one of the 16 skills, being able to cope with stress in a healthy way.
Yeah.
You know, you can't do that when that happens.
Yeah. I love also what you were talking about with the reptilian brain, because we talk a lot about this when I do sales trainings. When I talk about sales mindset, So often people look, we cold call for a living, right? I am used to rejection. Pretty comfortable with it. But I also know not to take it personally. I know not to tell myself the stories. But I talk in my sales trainings often about this reptilian mind and how we view someone hanging up on us on a cold call with the same level of danger as I say the woolly mammoth, not the saber-toothed tiger, but I love it either. It's the same thing. We look at it with the same level of threat.
Yes, in fact, Jennifer, I don't think you know this about me. I did for 3 years, I ran an EQ program for a branch of Northwestern Mutual for their financial advisors. And we
Ah,
met monthly and we worked on these skills so that they would be able to overcome the fear of rejection.
yeah, it's a huge part in sales of getting someone um, to be able to implement strategies in a way that will be successful,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
I love it. Thank you so much. I just there's so much parallel there with what we talk about, just in a very different shift. Um, so the other thing I was thinking about while you're talking is about like emotional intelligence versus the self-awareness. And then you came up and you brought that in to kind of the second part of what's so important in the three skills that you need to have. Can you talk a little bit more about self-awareness and the difference between kind of generalized emotional intelligence and then just kind of understanding yourself? Because I think that when we talk about things like being reactive, we lose that, right?
Hmm.
So can you kind of talk a little bit more about self-awareness?
Well, I'm thinking of a client right now. Just seems easy to give an example because
Yeah.
nobody knows who they are or the company or the name. But someone I've been working with recently, um, it's what we call dual relationship, where you have either a friendship outside the business or you are related by blood outside the business and then you work together. And
Mhm.
in those kind of relationships, you have to be very, very careful with boundaries. And so these two people are related by blood. And the person I'm talking to, well, I've talked to both of them, but the person I was talking to last week thought, because I've interviewed both of them, okay, thought that the other person, I'll just say they're cousins, the other cousin, he thought that everything was fine after they had a big altercation and a kind of like a blowout or a disagreement. And I was proposing that we need to do some joint coaching with that other person and he, so that this relationship thrives, not just survives. And he said, what do you mean? I said, well, I spoke to your cousin and your cousin does not feel like there's been resolution or forgiveness or acceptance and that the issue's still alive. And he said, he is a very, I don't want to give the impression he's ignorant because he is not. Very, very smart person, very engaged in the coaching, comes prepared with questions, does a great job, working on himself a lot. But he's like, what? That was the word. We just had a 3 or 4 hour lunch. And I asked her if everything was fine, and she told me it was. I said, oh, how interesting. When was this lunch? Oh, it was just like last week. I said, would you mind terribly looking at your calendar to tell me when the lunch was? And this, keep in mind, was last week that I was talking to him. Would you mind looking at your calendar? Turns out the lunch was in October. And the cousin told me this more recent than that. And he was just shocked. He didn't get it. He was like, I don't understand. I had also asked him to do an exercise in emotional self-awareness. So at the same time, he reported the results to me. He said, well, okay. When I kept track of my moods and what was going on at certain times of the day, I would have told you before that I was happy all the time. And he said, what I learned is I'm actually angry most of the time and maybe sad. So I'm just giving that as an example. Hopefully it illustrates and answers your questions that he's not very emotionally self-aware and
Mm,
he's the one running the company. So he's got to learn. I'm going to have to help him become more emotionally self-aware so that he can, handle the relationships he needs to handle.
It's I love that they both were part of the same conversation and had such different experiences.
Yes,
And
it's kind of
the
dramatic.
timeline, right? And that the timeline was like, it was just last week. It was just, and it was 4 months ago. Because I think that happens to a lot of us too. Like again, compartmentalizing or being busy or having a lot of spinning plates. A week turns into a month, turns into 3 very, very quickly. Um, that's really interesting. And still someone's ruminating and someone's like oblivious,
Yes,
right?
yes,
So
because
you've got like these two energies that are not compatible.
the female
Um,
cousin thinks she's losing her job, and
right,
he thinks, what's wrong? She's fine.
right, right. Wow. And that's a whole nother level when you have that sort of anxiety, right? Of like physically how it manifests in you and all that. I know. I want to circle back, but I do want to see again if anyone has any questions, and if you don't, it means that Roberta did such a phenomenal job. Um,
Or I'd put
oh,
everyone to sleep.
no, you did. I'm so like my brain is on fire right now. So I want to ask you my 3 questions. First
Sure.
is what's the biggest misconception about EQ?
That it's a soft skill and we don't need to pay money to work on soft skills, that it's not as important as a technical skill.
Right.
So another very similar way to say this, I once presented to a group, EO, Entrepreneurs Organization, and YPO, Young Presidents Organization, had a meeting combined, and I did a keynote to that group. And I told them, when I said to them, the research in EQ shows that if you want to be the most successful in your career that you can possibly become, EQ is more important than IQ. And they got mad. I mean, they were like, no, what are you talking about? That is not true. I thought they were going to boo me off the stage. But there is research that shows, yes, you have to have enough IQ to like my best example is technology and people in cybersecurity. My clients have to get certifications. So obviously you have to know how to hack. You have to be proficient in the hacking tool to get the certification in the first place, or you don't get your job. But how you progress, if you work well with the others on the team, if they're considering you for promotion and you want to get promoted, that's all EQ.
My second question is about disruption, of course. And I want to know why it's so important to be a disruptor in this space, and not necessarily in the EQ space, but in coaching and leadership and mental health, and all of this. Why is it so important to have a different kind of conversation?
Because so many of the clients I work with are extremely, they look to the rest of the company as successful. But then when I talk to them, they're anxiety driven. They go home at night and they're telling me, oh my gosh, I'm collapsing. I can barely even talk to my partner because I'm so worn out. It's like burnout, but the burnout is coming from having anxiety or having ADHD or, having depression. And these are things we can address. Nobody has to suffer in silence with these things. And if you want to be happy, because one of the EQ skills is happiness and well-being, we all want to be happy and personally fulfilled, whether it's in our work life or our personal life. You need to be aware of these things. You need to be aware of your leadership, your own leadership of you, as well as how your leaders run the company, things like that.
You mentioned this before, but I'd really like to have you reiterate this about the number one thing that we can all do today in 30 minutes. What task that can we complete to use this information and in turn drive more revenue to our businesses?
The biggest thing you can do is learn to take 3 deep breaths. That takes less than 30 seconds. Nobody knows you're doing it. I mean, I don't think in a meeting, like if you work in person, people aren't going to tell your stomach's puffing out to take the deep breath. And if you're on Zoom, nobody can see it. Sometimes I'm listening to incredibly, like this morning, it was a very sad story. That's what client was telling me. I was doing my deep breathing to keep my own nervous system regulated so
Yeah,
that I could be emotionally present and available to respond in the best way. So giving people the power of your mindful and intentional presence is gold. If you're a leader or a boss, people will go to the nth degree. They will go above and beyond to get the thing done for you that's important to you if you give them your presence. Like you're 100% there with them.
yeah.
Warm and firm. Warm and firm.
So rather than hot seat, I'll just kind of share here. Because there's nothing really specific that we talked about so many wonderful things, but I will tell you this. You said something that your first response is rarely the right one.
Yes.
And it's not your first thought, it's not your first instinct or whatever, but it's the response.
Yes.
I,
Which is usually a reaction.
right. And I want to tell you, I could cry today because I have had some situations in the last couple months where I have been more reactive than I would care to admit. And what you're saying is exactly true. No one ever looks back at reactive behavior and goes, I'm really proud of the way I handled that. That was me showing up as my best self, right? Ever with a reactive response. So I really want to drive that home today and kind of put myself out there and say that because I've felt that with myself. It's incredible how these messages come through and get reiterated right when you need to hear them. And so I really hope this resonates for someone else because when I am not reactive and something happens unexpected and even if physically, we do go into this fight or flight, right? And I think
Yes.
especially if you are a trauma survivor, um,
Yes.
if you've had traumatic experiences, it is kind of not a comfortable, but a familiar space for us. Crisis management is a familiar space for me. I don't like it, but I know it well, and I know
Mm.
what to do in it. Um, but it's that reactive part of it that I really want to work on for myself. And I'm going to challenge anyone else out there to do the same for yourself and to take that pause and breath, which is, I think, probably the most challenging thing to
It
do in the
is.
moment. The amount of self-control that it takes. I know it because I've passed right past it a few times, and I've never been proud of my initial reaction. So, and I realized today that that's why, because it wasn't the right one. And if I just waited and breathed. And then also with that, anytime that I've had something unexpected happen that's thrown me into fight or flight, and I have paused and waited to react, it never turns out as badly as I initially reptilian brain believe it will. And and my reflection on my response is always much more positive, right? I'm much prouder of the way I handle myself in those moments. So thank you so much for that because you really created um, a very clear visual for me. And again, I really hope this resonates for someone else.
My pleasure. And I just want to add one more thing. When you
Sure.
do that, you own the room. You're empowered and you're in your self agency when you do the pause. You own the room.
Thank you. Yeah, I think it's when it comes to EQ, it is probably the biggest area for improvement for me. And I think probably for a lot of people as well. Amal said, I think we have a maximum capacity and practicing EQ helps to expand that capacity. Absolutely. I think it's important to celebrate yourself when you catch yourself not immediately reacting. 100%.
Yes, that it reinforces it.
Yeah, it does. It does. Thank you for that. Roberta, thank you so much for being here this week. I've been looking forward to this since we got this booked, and I absolutely love working with you and learning from you. And just any time that I get to spend in your presence is always something to be grateful for. So thank you so much. I'm so glad you're here in Charleston.
Thank you.
We get to actually hang out in person.
Thank you, Jennifer. Same here.
You guys, we have Roberta's contact information in the chat. So if you would like to get in touch with her, if you'd like to learn more about how she could come bring EQ training and coaching to your organization, please reach out to her. She is an unbelievable resource and just a bottomless pit of knowledge. I mean, you met who has been a CPA, a psychologist, like you've had 9 lives, I swear. I love it. Just the way you continuously improve and better yourself and pivot to just match your zone of genius is it's incredible. So please reach out. Next week, we have Ron Ben Joseph joining us from Artful Speaking, and he is going to be so full of energy. You guys just need to take a seat and have a cup of coffee so we can keep up with him. He is super fun. I've known Ron for several years now, and I cannot wait for him to share with us about his expertise. You guys, any other recommendations or questions that you have after these, please get with us. And please like and follow us on YouTube. All of these episodes go onto YouTube after this, and I would love to have some more subscribers there. So we are at YouTube. Our channel is at Appreciated Asset, and would love to have you guys following us there. My 10-year-old always reminds me that we have some room for improvement with our following. And other than that, I hope you guys all have the very best day and look forward to seeing you again soon. Bye, everybody.
Bye.